Hi all. So we are moving from Gavin to Greg, and Greg Easton is the head of business development at Tollring. Greg has over 3 decades of experience in technology, encompassing business communications, contact center, and customer experience all in one. And Greg and his team are responsible for expanding Tollring's channel partners and enterprise customers globally. Tollring is a global market cloud software developer specializing in AI-powered business intelligence. This includes communication analytics, call center analytics, AI-powered conversation analysis, voice recording, fraud protection, scam detection, and I'm sure much, much more. And I am super interested to hear this conversation around AI transforming customer conversations into real insights, something we all need. So let me hand over to Greg.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for joining. As Katie kindly introduced me, I am Greg Easton, Head of Business Development at Tollring. And today I'm going to be talking to you about why we think phone calls are probably the most valuable source of customer experience data that you possess, and posing the question about whether you're deriving full value from that data. Just a couple of things before I start. There will be a poll soon, kind of not quite halfway through my presentation. I'd love to get some engagement from the audience. So please look for that when it comes and be ready to participate and vote and be part of that poll. Secondly, you have the ability to ask questions using the chat feature. Please do ask questions if you've got any questions. I'll try and leave some time at the end of my session to answer those. But if we run out of time, I will certainly follow up with you outside of the event. And then lastly, we've got a little prize draw at the end of the session where you can win a lovely Garmin Forerunner smartwatch. You'll need to be able to scan a QR code in order to enter that. So make sure you've got your phone camera ready. Okay, so let me get started. And we're making playful use of a very well-known meme. I'm sure you've all seen this one. It's probably the most reused meme in history, and our use of it is really to draw attention to the fact that most organizations believe that they understand their customers. You know, they do net promoter score surveys, they have dashboards, they map their customer journeys, and they model their customer experience to the nth degree. But there's often a source of data that's overlooked. Somewhere where every day customers explain candidly, not in a after call survey, but candidly when speaking to your agents, exactly what's broken, what they don't trust, and what might make them leave, or conversely, what delights them and what causes them to become a brand ambassador. And what I'm talking about is, yep, good old-fashioned telephone calls. And, you know, we have moved into an omnichannel world, but it's easy to overlook the humble telephone call. And there's definitely been a move to enabling customers to communicate with us through different modes, whether that's web chat or SMS or social media. Today, 64% of customer interactions are still handled by people on phone calls with customers. And surprisingly, 71% of Gen Z, or Gen Z, depending on where you are in the world, still prefer a phone call when they need to resolve an issue. And the difference between telephone calls and other of those channels of communication is phone calls capture not just the bare facts, but they capture nuance, the moments where decisions are made, where frustration escalates, confidence drops, trust is tested. And in that moment, no one's rushing to fill in a form. They're not going to do a survey. And therefore, the potential of utilizing that intelligence is lost forever. And so what happens in a world where only a tiny fraction of these customer conversations are ever heard by business leadership, decisions get made based on what only a small fraction of customers say, and very often long after they've said it. And so decisions are made based on what's easily measurable rather than the reality of the situation. And they don't factor in what those customers felt when it mattered most. And they miss what's actually driving customer sentiment and ultimately customer decisions. And that's the blind spot that most organizations are still dealing with today. So I'm going to run a quick poll, and if one of my kind helpers wouldn't mind just pushing that poll up into the workspace, um, I'd like you to vote, and feel free to choose more than one of these options. But where are your senior leadership team getting most of your customer insights from today? Are they getting them from surveys like Net Promoter Score, which are typically post-interaction, where we've got periodic feedback loops? Are they getting them from escalations, complaints, and anecdotes, the sort of stuff that gets reported upward, and very often the sort of stuff that's only shared with senior leadership when people want to share it with senior leadership? Are you already actually recording calls and manually reviewing those calls and scoring them against scorecards? Or are you using technology to do that quality assurance automatically by automatically rating or surfacing topics within your calls using conversational intelligence tools? It'd be lovely to get some input to that. If people wouldn't mind voting, that would be fantastic. I'm just going to see if I can see if people are voting. Yes, we've got some stuff coming in. So I'm going to carry on with my presentation, but please do carry on voting. It would be lovely to get some more of that insight coming in. And the reason for really kind of engaging with you in this way and asking how you're currently doing this is because the irony is we talk about the voice of the customer, but very often we never hear them actually speak. And the voice of the customer doesn't just manifest as a score, which is measured by and averaged by a CX team. Customers have a literal voice that tells us how they actually feel. Frustration, hesitation, loss of trust that doesn't show up on a score, but it shows up in tone, it shows up in pauses, and it shows up as the questions that customers repeat when they're unsure or they're uncomfortable. And those signals matter far beyond average scores. Just think about every time a customer sounds unsure or hesitates when you're trying to close a sale. What is it that prompted that behavior? Is it a trend? Is it a one off? And how could it be avoided in the framing of the conversation? Or how could it be avoided through better product design or service design or positioning? And most importantly, those insights ever reach your senior leadership team? Now, the problem, of course, is if you're a large business and you're handling a large volume of calls, then that's a lot of data. If you're recording those calls, it's a lot of data to sift through, right? Well, let's have a back of a fag packet calculation. Let's imagine a medium-sized business. You're handling 1,000 calls a day, 5 minutes each, which is a pretty short call. That equates to 83 hours of calls to listen to and try and understand what customers are saying. And that's not even including the time taken to actually make notes and follow up on these calls. So if you're employing a full-time person to do this quality assurance, the chances are they're only going to be able to review less than 10% of your calls. That's a small number of your calls. So you're getting some value, you're pulling out a few themes, it's useful, but it's fundamentally limited. And it's also very expensive. You have to pay a skilled person to do a job which, let's face it, is not particularly rewarding. It's pretty mundane and is not a job that many people like doing. So the question is, how do we do it better? And how is Tollring helping to fix this for businesses like yours? So what's changed is that no longer is a selective sampling. And the average across all businesses is between 2 and 5% of calls are ever actually analyzed for data. But what we're saying is that always on analysis, what we call auto QA, means that every conversation can contribute insight. not just the ones that someone had time to review. So through automatic transcription, language can be immediately analyzed across thousands of calls, and patterns emerge without someone having to search for them. And practically, that means recurring phrases start clustering into themes, spikes in certain languages are flagged, and specific words or topics can be tracked over time. It means that supervisors, managers, and leadership teams don't need to listen to thousands of calls. They see where attention is needed and investigate then further. And this shifts conversations from anecdotal indicators to evidence-based, fully quantifiable business intelligence. And critically, it doesn't require data scientists, analysts, or specialist teams because Auto QA can surface the themes that matter with minimal setup. And with conversational AI interfaces, think ChatGPT, leaders can query the data using natural language, asking questions in an iterative manner in order to get to the heart of any issue. And this means that the barrier between the question and the answer has dropped, with insight building continuously, with every call every day becoming richer and more relevant over time as the data set increases. So I want to take some time to look at examples of where this is making a difference to businesses today. And I want you to think about these sorts of questions, which are questions that are all pertinent to any business that is engaging with customers in voice conversations. So do you know which of your agent behaviors consistently lead to better outcomes? Whether that's sales, upsells, contract retentions, it doesn't matter. Which of your agents are behaving in ways that lead to better outcomes? What are customers really telling us about ourselves and our competitors? And are product or service issues isolated, or are they part of a wider problem? And why? Because really, conversation analytics is all about having always on monitoring that surfaces all of these things and more with zero effort required to manage day to day. You've already got the data, the richest customer intelligence data you'll ever own, the pinnacle of customer understanding. And so the range of use cases is incredibly broad. And so let's have a look at some of the actual use cases that are driving the adoption of this sort of technology. So first of all, we talk about friction, and friction is something that we all want to avoid in any business because friction leads to dissatisfaction and customer effort scoring is difficult. But what conversational intelligence does is it provides you with a shortcut to reducing negative interactions with a fraction of the effort. So for example, dissatisfaction, rarely starts as a complaint. In fact, if you get a complaint, you've probably already let it run too far. And usually dissatisfaction appears as repeated questions, uncertainty, or customers saying things like, but I thought this would, or yeah, no one mentioned that. But with conversational analytics, you can interrogate your conversational transcripts into surface clusters of this kind of language. Keywords and phrase trends, topics and groupings, and sentiment shifts make it possible to see where confusion or frustration is forming, even if customers never formally complain. And CX teams don't have to listen to more calls. Instead, they're shown where the friction is concentrated by product, by process, or by team. And so they can fix these issues before they escalate into complaints and churn. And actually, we're already at a point where at least half of CX teams are finding this stuff indispensable for reducing that friction and disappointment. And let's think about sales. The difference between a win and a delayed sale, or an outright loss, comes down to how certainty is handled. Conversation analysis allows organizations to see what questions appear before customers commit and where the hesitation shows. And it shows how high-performing interactions differ in language and structure by analyzing talk patterns, keyword themes, and outcome-linked conversations. Sales leaders can identify behaviors and explanations that correlate with successful outcomes. And that insight supports coaching and messaging alignment based on interaction data. So this is across things like talk patterns, keyword themes, and outcome analysis. And by understanding, in addition to this, what's missing from your portfolio or your service offering, including what your customers are saying about your competitors, puts you in the driving seat. Understanding what changes will make a real difference to sales outcomes. Now, I've got an eye on the time. Are we still okay for time? I think we are. I'm going to carry on. So the next part I want to focus on is detecting risk without manual review. So improving conversational outcomes is a big part of what we do, but it's also, it's important to not overlook compliance in all of this. And in regulated environments, conversations are evidence, but compliance is a tax, which is now easily reduced. And what I mean by that is with conversational analysis, instead of randomly sampling calls, you can now surface where required topics, whether those are disclosures or sensitive terms, where they appear and where customers signal confusion or vulnerability. So transcription, keyword monitoring, and alerting allow compliance teams to focus attention on interactions that contain risk signals rather than searching blindly. And this provides broader oversight without increasing manual review and effort. So confident compliance is now well within reach. And then finally, I wanted to touch on leadership teams. So typically, they get to see metrics and summaries that have been analyzed and sanitized for their own consumption. The conversation intelligence adds something different. It adds visibility into the language and the communication patterns that customers use at scale with absolute personalization and relevance. So dashboards that are built from conversation themes, from sentiment trends, and recurring topics allow leaders to react quickly to emerging trends and to make proactive moves that make a difference to the bottom line. It's not about listening to individual calls, it's about understanding the patterns that are grounded in real interactions between your customers and your agents, not just survey data or operational metrics. And so now, overall, we've got a really easy way to understand our customer interactions and to give access to everyone that needs it, whether that's customer experience, whether it's sales or compliance, leadership teams, product design, the list goes on. The use cases are multiple. So what we're really saying is that customer experience optimization doesn't need to be difficult. Customers are already telling us what's unclear, what they're unsure about, what might stop them from moving forward. That signal already exists inside your organization in everyday phone conversations. And conversation intelligence doesn't create new information. It makes existing information usable at scale. It changes not the data is the data, but it changes who can see it, how quickly they can see it, how consistently it informs decisions, and how usable that data becomes. And organizations that do this move from reacting to problems after they surface, to spotting patterns while they're forming, from relying on summaries to grounding decisions based in real customer interactions and real customer language. So the question isn't whether customers are telling you what matters. The question is whether your organization is set up to be able to hear it and change while it is still able to change the outcomes. So why are we telling you all this today? Where does Tollring fit into this? Well, we help organizations turn those everyday phone calls into usable conversational intelligence, built for business, always on, and secure by design. So if phone conversations matter to your business, if you want to understand your customers effortlessly, and you want to drive those outcomes, think Tollring. And that's the end of that. I said that there would be a prize draw at the end. So please do get your phone out, scan that QR code, and enter the draw. I believe this is a very nice smartwatch, and I'm sure it would be a great thing to get your hands on. So thank you very much for listening. I don't know that we've received any questions. It doesn't look like it. Um, I'm happy to wrap up. Katie, if you have any closing thoughts, please feel free to share them.
Thank you so much. I'm just wondering, am I allowed to enter into that prize draw? That watch looks pretty nifty.
I should think you are. Yeah.
Scanning in a moment.
Yes.
Thank you, Greg. That was fantastic. And right at the beginning, something you said really made me smile, and I think I've smiled all the way through since. But you said around organizations believing that they understand the customer or what the customer wants. And I think that is it's such a prudent point, because so often we have these assumptions, we have a very internal view of what the customer experience looks like, and yet often the reality of that is not the same. So I think you're totally hitting the nail on the head with what you're solving.
Yeah.
Also, many moons ago, I used to run both a CX and a QA department, and gosh, if I had access to conversational analytics back then, it just would have been an absolute game changer. And it still blows my mind if I come across a company that isn't utilizing this kind of technology, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's an absolute game changer. Look, businesses have been recording, customer interaction, customer calls for a very, very long time. That's nothing new. Businesses have also been analyzing those calls, quality management, quality assurance for a very, very long time. The problem with that is you can't listen to all of those calls. And as I mentioned in my presentation, the average is about between 2 and 5% of calls are ever listened to. And so what businesses are doing is they are generating incredibly rich data, right? But they're throwing 98% of it out the window because they can't use it. And
Mhm.
that's really the benefit of AI. It allows us to intelligently use data to drive better outcomes. And that's really the fundamental message of what we're saying.
Absolutely. And thankfully, I am seeing more and more B2C organizations using this kind of technology. But where I still see a massive gap is in B2B relationships. And it's normally just because they're not set up from like the simplicity of a CRM to be able to apply this kind of technology. But are you working with many B2B organizations on the front of conversational analytics?
Yeah, we work across both B2B and B2C. In fact, a lot of our customers are in the professional services world that are providing business services to customers, whether that's insurance or financial services. Absolutely. We do work across both B2C and B2B.
Great, because I think there's just so many untapped conversations in B2C, in B2B, where it's just gold dust
Absolutely. Yeah.
to
And
mankind.
you mentioned CRM systems, and CRM systems are massively important to businesses. Businesses invest a huge amount of money in their CRM systems, which they see as that single source of truth. And one of the other things that we're doing is enabling businesses to take those conversations,
Mhm.
take an AI summary of a conversation, and automatically embed it in a customer record. So again, just enhancing the value that is derived from maintaining a good CRM system.
Amazing. I think we need to talk offline about the B2B element. I need to know more about what you're doing.
Yeah,
Um,
with that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And as Greg, as he said, please contact him with any questions on LinkedIn. Keep the conversation going. Make sure you scan the QR code. If you miss it, tap into the recording afterwards to get that. That's too good of an opportunity to miss. And for everybody who's still tapped in about 5 minutes' time, we are going to be having a live panel discussion, which you don't want to miss. So please come back in 5 minutes and we'll have the panel discussion going. Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
Awesome, Katie. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.